Welcome to episode 103 of the G2 on 5G. It's the latest inside scoop on everything 5G. We cover 6 topics in about 20 minutes, and it's brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. I'm Will Townsend, and joining me again this week is fellow analyst Anshel Sag. Let's get started, and we are both on the West Coast. So how's your week going, my friend?
Pretty good. I was at a AMD Financial Analyst Day, followed by AMD Industry Analyst Day, which is why I'm dressed like this. And it was very good. And AMD had a lot of cool stuff to talk about, including some 5G things, which we'll be covering in future podcasts.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I've been here. I spent time with Ericsson at their D15 lab in Santa Clara. I hosted a 5G developer journey discussion, and it will be recorded and posted. So hit my Twitter feed or my LinkedIn feed, and I'll be sharing that. But that was a great event. Really enjoyed it. But let's get started with my first topic. And so this week, news broke that NTT Docomo and Nokia are teaming up on 6G trials. And my question is it too soon? And so, here are the details. So NEC and Fujitsu are also going to be involved. No surprise, Japanese infrastructure companies. Docomo is saying that they're going to begin indoor trials before March of 23, and that outdoor trials will happen over the following 12 months. So it's interesting. Typically Korea has been sort of a leader. They were a leader with 5G, and we were hearing some things out of Korea on 6G as well. But what's interesting is what's critical to these POCs is basically an AI native air interface coupled with sub-terahertz radio. And the objective, and I'm just sort of reading from the light reading article, the objective is to demonstrate performance gains relative to conventional air interfaces, because you've got a lot of beamforming that's going on here, and you're at a very high frequency band, obviously in the terahertz range. So I think it's interesting. We've talked about Samsung networks in the past, and what they're doing from a POC perspective. I guess it's good to get in front of things, but there's so much still that needs to be done with 5G, especially in the Japanese market. But what are your thoughts?
I think it's okay to have exploratory things. I think when you look at how long it took 5G to come to market, I think it's healthy to do these kinds of exploratory trials. And I think, doing indoor stuff is probably going to be where you see a lot happening, just to minimize the, potential regulatory issues. But I just think that in general, it's not a big deal. I think what's important is, like, what are they testing and how are they testing it? So I'm actually less opposed to this. I don't really think it's too soon. I think it would be, this sounds much more of like a research project than anything.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think it's interesting what they're doing with the air interface, and there could be applications for 5G as well, like 5G advanced in the future and that sort of thing. Because with 5G you've got massive MIMO and beamforming, and it's a lot more complicated. But yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll keep tabs on it and report back. But let's go to your first topic, and you want to talk about the India Carrier Association. And there's some pushback, it sounds like, on private 5G, right?
Yeah, so I was reading a couple articles that were talking about how the Cellular Operators Association of India explicitly said that they don't believe that private 5G networks should be allowed to be run by enterprises, because that minimizes the potential of investment from their key members like Bharti Airtel, Reliance Jio, and Vodafone.
Yeah.
So it sounds like this might be something that creates conflict within the Indian market in rolling out 5G, because it was written to the communications minister, and it was saying that there's no business case for the rollout of 5G networks if there's no private 5G networks on corporate campuses. So I think this is maybe an inherently flawed premise.
Yeah.
Both can kind of coexist together. But the fact that the carriers seem threatened by private 5G makes me think that there's a possibility that they don't really have any plans for private 5G rollouts, or enabling that, and that they're too focused on public networks to really understand how, both can benefit each other long term.
Yeah, and I've spoken about this in the past. I mean, there are going to be multiple routes to private. There are going to be slices of public networks. I mean, look at the T-Mobile Advanced Network Solutions launch. They're taking a three-pronged approach with public, hybrid, and completely private. And so from my perspective, this sounds like the operators in India are wanting to, sort of protect what they're doing from an investment perspective. But I think there's room for multiple paths to market. I mean, typically providing more choice is a good thing for customers from a cost perspective. And then I've spoken about this many times. Multiple paths to market, and different solutions breeds innovation, and it kind of raises the water level up from that perspective. But it sounds like they're being pretty short-sighted, they're being protectionist, but it'll be interesting to see how this all rolls out. But let's move to my second topic this week, and I do want to talk about Korea. So SK Telecom, they've launched their second 5G edge zone in Seoul. And so the question, that comes to my mind is, what does this mean for 5G service delivery? It's no surprise Korea has been a leader in 5G, not only just from an infrastructure deployment perspective, but from a use case perspective. They are actually leveraging AWS wavelength.
Mhm.
No surprise. Basically what they're going to do with this is just to improve the overall efficiency of their 5G cloud services. And that makes perfect sense because, one of the challenges with cloud is latency, right? And with edge, that can put that compute power closer to the data creation point and reduce that latency and, increase performance. So I think it's a natural evolution. You're seeing mobile network operators around the world, in the US, in Europe, investing in edge capabilities. Some are doing it a little more efficiently than others. I mean, like, and I don't like to poke Verizon, but I will for a moment. They've been just really sort of, building out edge enablement and not really focused on discrete use cases. And I've talked about that in the past. AT&T taking a more measured approach, marrying edge enablement with specific vertical applications like private 5G for manufacturing automation, which I've always spoken to as one of the bigger opportunities there. But what are your thoughts?
I think these edge zones are good to have. I think, AT&T might have the right approach, in the sense that I think Verizon is too aggressive
Yeah,
with their edge deployment because their network isn't mature enough, and I
right.
think T-Mobile is not mature enough. So like I think it's one of those things where maybe AT&T has the Goldilocks approach at this point.
Yeah,
Um,
I would agree with that.
and I just think that there is a balance to be striked with this, or stricken, I
Yeah.
guess the correct tense. Um, I just think that I think edge will be necessary, but it needs to match the network and
Right.
the network topology. And developers need to understand how they can use it, to maximize the potential of the 5G network, because I also think standalone is a key component of this.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's an excellent point that you make. That the edge investment needs to be sized to the network deployment. Carriers are at different, points in their deployment based on their spectrum footprint and their holdings. And we've talked about this. T-Mobile's had the most complete layer cake, low, mid, and high band. In the US, AT&T and Verizon have had to catch up with C-band. And then 110, AT&T added to their mid-band footprint with 110. But yeah, that's an excellent point. And, just throwing edge enablement, at a network without really discrete use case, I think, the payback, it's going to take a lot longer to get the payback on that. But, time will tell. But let's move to your second topic. And this broke right after we posted our podcast last week. But T-Mobile launched its voice over NR. And you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so it was a fairly small launch, but it is the first to launch voice over NR, at least in the US. I don't know about internationally, but I think also
Yeah,
internationally.
I believe so.
Um,
Yeah.
and so it's a limited launch. I think it's like Portland and Salt Lake City or something like that.
Hmm.
So it's a very limited launch, and it's only on the S21. So it's a very specific device. And I actually tweeted at Neville to understand why the S21. And he basically said, this is the phone we've been testing on since we started rolling out VoNR. So
Okay.
this very, I would almost say this is like almost like a proof of concept in the sense of how many users it probably affects, because probably in like the low thousands. But it is something that I'm very interested in, and I'm interested to see how they roll this out. But the key here is having that VoNR capabilities allows them to actually prepare to go full standalone, because
Right.
without 5G voice, you can't go full standalone because you need legacy voice to run on a legacy network. So
Yeah.
VoNR is basically the next step for them to go full standalone on mid-band, and potentially low band, to get rid of their legacy 4G network, or at
Mhm.
least create a full standalone 5G so that they can have a 4G as a fallback where
Yeah.
it's necessary. And then in addition to that launch, they also launched a 5G hotspot, which is a device that they are branding themselves. And it is a uh, pretty big device in terms of battery capacity. It's bigger than the Inseego battery that they have. And it's
Mhm.
actually a cheaper device. It's $200, and it can connect up to 32 devices simultaneously, and it's compatible with all of its existing networks, including its midband. And it will be free for users that have eligible data plans. So you have to sign up for a new line of service for it.
Yeah.
But the reality is, it's a pretty good it's a pretty good deal, and I think there's going to be a lot of people who take advantage of this hotspot, and
Yeah.
it's both for business user accounts as well as consumers. So I could definitely see some small businesses taking advantage of this, especially if they have good mid-band coverage where they live.
Yeah. I didn't dig into the hotspot. So did you mention, so it covers low, mid, and millimeter wave, or just low and mid band?
Low and mid, I didn't see anything about millimeter wave, and
Okay.
honestly, I don't think T-Mobile is particularly interested in millimeter wave.
Right.
Um, but the Verizon and Seago MiFi is $400, which probably requires millimeter wave. So I think
Yeah.
not having millimeter wave in there makes it considerably cheaper. And even if you don't have, add a new line, $200 is still not a horrible price.
No, no, it's a great price point. And you're right, Verizon has been focused on building out, their high band. It's been sort of their priority, because that's the spectrum that they had when they started deploying 5G. And you're right, what we hear from Neville, and you and I spent a lot of time with Neville, is that T-Mobile is very focused on coverage, right? And providing that optimal balance of performance and latency and throughput and device support and that sort of thing. So it is quite impressive that these hotspots can support up to 32 devices. So good stuff. But let me go to my third and final topic this week, and I want to talk about Nokia, again, and Cellnex, and they're collaborating on private networking in Europe. And my question is, can it accelerate LTE and 5G private deployments? I've spoken about Nokia in the past. They're definitely a leader within private. Although I do believe, after spending time with Ericsson this week and Cradlepoint, that Ericsson and Cradlepoint, together with their new enterprise division, will close that gap pretty quickly. But for our viewers and listeners that are not familiar with Cellnex, they're a tower company, and they acquired a company called Edscom, and Edscom was a Finnish edge connectivity play. And so it's sort of a broad alliance. And there wasn't really a lot of mention around 5G. It was more focused on LTE, and honestly, a lot of the use cases today for private, LTE does the job. But as that matures, and as enterprises get their hands on cellular networking and put it through its paces, it's going to be quite evident that 5G and the low latency that it can deliver can do a lot of really innovative things, like with computer vision and AR and VR that you cover as well. But I think this is strong. This is Nokia picking a tower partner that has some edge capabilities. I mean, obviously Cellnex is wanting to push further down the infrastructure stack, and I think collaboration is a good thing. But do you have any thoughts before we move to your last topic?
No, not really. I don't think I have enough knowledge or experience in the area to kind of give a helpful insight. But in
Yeah.
general, I think Nokia is very good at picking partners that help them accelerate their growth. And they have so much experience in private networking, especially in Europe, that I think you know s- they've chosen Cellnex for a reason, and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
Nokia definitely has a lot of expertise, and I'm sure Cellnex looked at their expertise and chose them for that reason.
Yeah. I agree with you. Well, let's go to your third and final topic. And we've beaten this horse pretty badly on the whole FAA, FCC, avionics, and that sort of thing. But you have an update uh,
Yes.
with the NTIA.
I'm very excited because this actually happened like literally after we wrapped the recording of our last podcast.
Yeah.
And basically, what happened is there was a conference that occurred earlier this month, about a week ago. It's called the Connected Aviation Intelligence Conference for Digital Transformation, AI, and Innovation. And there was a speaker at this conference at a panel called C-band, What's the Long-Term Solution for the US Aviation Industry? And that was on June 1st. And they basically had a speaker from the NTIA named Frank Sanders who spoke at this conference on this panel, and
Yeah.
he specifically said that in the the C band from 3700 to 3900, they weren't in their preliminary testing. 5G transmitters were not um, showing harmful interference with altimeters. So it's a very interesting development because we actually have concrete people who are working at government agencies talking about this in public now,
Yeah.
and giving concrete information. Admittedly, this is still preliminary, so it isn't complete in terms
Yeah.
of fully um, addressing the issue, I think,
Yeah.
but it definitely has made it very clear that people who believe this to be a real problem are very much not on the side of reality or the data, at least that's available today. So
Yeah.
I got very excited about this because this is very concrete. And he said that if further testing does find interference, a technical fix appears to be available via filtering of the altimeters and or the 5G transmitters, which we already knew. So
Yeah.
um, I'm ready for this to be a non-issue. But I
Yeah.
wanted to bring it up because this is the first time we have concrete people saying something concretely that work within the government that are, partners with the FAA and the FCC and the whatchamacallit, the yeah, FAA and the FCC, because NTIA kind of bridges the two.
They bridge the two. Yeah. So the NTIA is the National Transportation. What's the
No,
acronym stand for?
it's for telecommunications.
Oh, telecommunications. Okay.
Yeah, NTIA is like a their government National Telecommunications and Information Administration.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, cool. Yeah, I thought for some reason it was tied to the FAA.
No,
Well,
it's not under Department of Transportation. No.
got it, got it. Yeah, so I mean, just, the drama continues here, and clearly, this may have been sort of a money grab approach from the FAA standpoint with the FCC,
I,
given
I don't
price
even know if
guidelines.
I don't even know if it was the FAA. I think it was more the carriers and the airlines, specifically when I say carriers, because the
Yeah,
problem
yeah.
is carriers means both airlines
Yeah,
and operators. But in this case, I think it was actually the airlines that were the problem here, and they
yeah,
just didn't want to pay for potential upgrades, so they tried to find a way to get the FCC to pay for it. And I think the data isn't really supporting it. I actually saw some articles out there that I haven't had a chance to read yet, but talk about how we got to this potential, no fly day. It's on ProPublica. It was published on May 26th, but it's a long article talking about how we got to where we are. So I'm going to read up on it. Highly recommend some other people do too. But it says inside the government fiasco that nearly closed the US air system.
crazy, man. Well, hey, it's been another great podcast this week. Why don't you take us home?
Absolutely. We hope our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If anyone out there would like to provide specific insights for a future 5G podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will's at Will Town Tech, and I'm at Anshel. We hope you have a great weekend, and please tune in again next week.